having the private practice feels really great. But then I was like, what else? First of all, there's like kind of a ceiling, like you get this many clients and then you can't take any more. And how do you continue to make extra income after that? But also, how do you diversify so that you can keep yourself really interested in all the different things that you're doing?
This is Therapist Clubhouse, a podcast for private practice entrepreneurs. I'm Annie Schusler. Today I'm talking to Jeff Guenther, a private practice entrepreneur in Portland, Oregon, and the founder of 4 businesses designed to help therapists, including his new venture, Therapy Den. Welcome, Jeff. Thank you for being on Therapist Clubhouse.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So I've been looking forward to this. So will you tell us, you have how many businesses right now?
Let's see. I think it's up to 5 businesses right now.
Oh my gosh. Okay. All right. We're going to rewind and go into more of this, but will you tell us what those 5 businesses are?
Sure, of course. Well, I have my private practice where I'm a licensed professional counselor in Portland, Oregon. I also rent office space to therapists and counselors, part-time office space, and I have 4 different locations in the city where I do that. I run this thing called the Practice Academy, and it's a website and it's a blog where I help counselors and therapists, wellness providers move up in search engine rankings and attract more clients online. I also run a local mental health directory, online mental health directory here in Portland. That's been going on for 3 years at portlandtherapycenter.com. And that's become the number one way Portlanders find counselors in the city. And I just launched, or I'm starting to work on a new business that hasn't quite launched yet, but hopefully at the end of summer or early fall. It will be a local mental health directory for the Bay Area. So that's number 5.
So exciting. And that's where I am, is the Bay Area. So
that's right.
Very excited about that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. And what kind of entities are those businesses? Are they sole proprietorships? Are they LLCs or what? How do you have those?
Yeah. All of that. They're like the private practice is sole proprietor, and then the other businesses are LLCs. However, the renting part-time therapy space and then the local mental health directory for Portland, that's under just Portland Therapy Center, which is its own LLC. So the Practice Academy has its own thing, and then the mental health directory for the Bay Area, which we called Therapy Den, that's its own LLC. And Therapy Den, I work with 2 other partners, and for all the other businesses, I just do it all on my own.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay. And let's rewind, because I'm assuming the first one of all those businesses was your therapy practice. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So who do you see there?
Well, let's see. I graduated from graduate school in 2005. I went to USC down in Southern California, and I got my degree in marriage and family therapy. And my goal was to be a marriage and family therapist and see families and kids, and maybe even like specialize in teenagers. So got my degree down at USC, and then a couple weeks later drove up to Portland, moved to Portland, and I tried to open my practice, because you can open your practice in Portland just, as long as you have a master's degree and a supervisor. And that didn't really go very well because I was really nervous. And so I got like a little office space, and I started seeing clients, and I just started freaking out. Like I had like anxiety attacks while I was being a therapist. So it was very, I did not plan on that happening, and that was really hard for me to handle. So I stopped doing that pretty quickly, because I was like, all right, this is probably not the right time. And instead, I started working at an agency. Well, actually, it was first I started working at like a suicide crisis line, where I answered phones late into the night for people that were having panic attacks and contemplating suicide and stuff like that. And that was really difficult because it's just sort of like one crisis after the other. And it was a huge like national crisis line, so the phones just never stopped ringing. I worked there for a year, and then I worked as a outpatient child and family therapist in a school district in a suburb outside of Portland. And I was like, okay, finally, I'm going to, be a family therapist and work with these kids. And I even taught this parenting class. I was like 25 or 26 at the time. So I was teaching parenting classes to parents that were mandated to go to get these parenting skills. And that was kind of funky because I was this kid and there was all these parents that were a lot older than me. And it was really difficult to connect with them. I didn't have any kids.
Did they ask you often if you had kids or not?
Yeah, always.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah. So of course I'd say no, I don't. But I was a preschool teacher for a couple years when I lived in San Diego, and I studied children and adolescents, and it's my passion. And so I sort of like won over some parents, but most of the parents were just like, meh, look at this kid. What has he got to actually teach us? And I had a lot, but I'm not sure if I was like the best parent educator at that time, but I was trying really hard. But the more that I worked with kids and families, I also had to go into like families' homes and do family therapy in their homes. I got to this point where I just really couldn't stand the parents. So the parents couldn't stand me, and I couldn't stand them. I really loved working with the kids, but it was just I was having a hard time like empathizing with the parents. And again, I was kind of like a kid myself in my mid-20s, so there was maybe like some countertransference or something going on there. And that only lasted for like a year and a half until I then decided to try again, having a private practice, hopefully getting over my like anxiety attacks that I was getting before. And I did, and I wasn't feeling anxious in my private practice anymore. I was starting to like gain more clients, but I wasn't working with families or kids, even though that was my intention in graduate school. And instead, I was aiming my marketing at hipsters in Portland. And there's a lot, as you can imagine.
You throw a rock, you probably hit a hipster.
Yeah, so many hipsters. And so that was what I was marketing towards, and I got a few of them, and then they told their friends, and they told their friends, and it just sort of landed up being really, really successful, just focusing on that demographic.
Okay, great. And is that kind of still the demographic that you tend to work with?
Actually, yeah, I stuck with it. They ended up like, so, like I guess hipsters is sort of like adults in their 20s and 30s. And the Portland hipster, they really enjoy going to therapy and they enjoy process work. It seems like a lot of them, or my demographic, my population, they enjoy being in long-term therapy. They might, like work in the service industry or retail. And a lot of the things that they're coming in with is, I'm getting close to 30 or I'm in my 30s and life isn't exactly what I thought it was going to be. And so those are the main folks. And some of them eventually kind of move on to like creative jobs, like working in the creative industry or working in like graphic design or working in marketing or being artists, or performers. So a lot of my clients happen to be artists and creative types.
And in that second iteration of your private practice, were there ever any low moments or scary moments and, in not having enough clients or in something going wrong? And if there were, how did you get through it?
Well, there was a low moment, and I kind of skipped over this part real fast, but we'll go back. When I was working for the agency where I was a child and family therapist, um, that was, I mean, all in all, it was going well, even though I was like struggling connecting with some of the parents. But there was this weird thing that was happening, and maybe you or your listeners can understand this. But when you work at an agency, there's just like tons of paperwork.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so much paperwork, and all the paperwork that I was doing was on the computer. So you would go into the computer after you'd see, you'd go online, you'd type up your notes for that client, and there's all these check boxes and all these forms and everything that you had to input. About 30 to 40% of the time when I saw a kid, they wouldn't show up because like these are middle school kids. They did not want to sit in therapy with me. They looked at me like I was like it was a punishment or something. So it took a while to like create a rapport with them and show them that I wasn't the enemy. But a lot of the times, 30-40% of the time, they wouldn't show up. And so when they wouldn't show up, I'd have to go into my, log onto my computer and tick all these check boxes saying they didn't show up, and this is, they're planning on showing up again, and then type in the little form, this is why they didn't show up. And so I was doing that, and I was there for like a year and a half. And then after a year and a half, the agency got audited, like most agencies do. They just get audited every so often, a year or two or something. And they landed up looking at the notes and everything that I was putting in there. And they found out that for all the kids that were not showing up, I was ticking the wrong checkbox, and the computer system thought that they were showing up, and the agency was actually billing for those no-shows when we shouldn't have been billing for those no-shows. So we were billing the state, who was paying for these kids, and the agency ended up owing thousands and thousands of dollars because all the kids that didn't show up on my caseload we were billing for.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And my supervisor wasn't catching it, and my supervisor's supervisor and the billing person wasn't catching it. Nobody really saw, because I was putting in the boxes, they didn't show up. I was just checking the wrong, like the most important tick box I wasn't ticking. So I didn't know that this was going on, and the audit finished, and they reported, to the agency that we owed thousands of dollars, and it was because Jeff wasn't ticking the right tick box.
No.
And so they called me in on Monday. They were like, "Hey, Jeff, we need to talk to you at the end of the week on Friday." And I was like, "Oh, cool, whatever." Like, I had never gotten fired before, so I didn't know that that was a bad sign. On the end of the week, on Friday, I came in, I was like, "Hey, what's up?" And there's HR there and everything. They're like, "Well, this happened. You've actually been committing fraud." Because I was like, "Fraud?" It's like, I had no idea. And they're like, "Well, I guess it's unintentional fraud." And I was like, "I'm not even getting anything out of this. I didn't mean to do it, like you can see." And they're like, "Well, we have to show the state that we're doing something about it, so we're going to let you go and we're firing you." And that was, yeah. I was so sad and so confused, and it felt so unfair. And I remember, like, the thing that like made me so upset was that on the next Monday, when I should have come back to work the next week, I was supposed to see this one kid who was really struggling, really didn't want to like come to school, really didn't want to talk to me in therapy. He was starting to trust me, and we would play Uno together, like probably every therapist has done with kids. And I said, "If you beat me in Uno, then I owe you a Coke." And he was like, "Okay." And so I owed him a Coke. And I wasn't able to bring it to him on Monday. I wasn't able to like go back into the agency on Monday. And I was just like, "You got to give this kid a Coke." He really wanted to.
Oh.
And I knew that they couldn't because nobody was going to be there for this kid. So that was just like killer. I was really, really sad about that. Yeah. So that was a down moment.
Yeah. Yeah. And then how did you get through it? Like, you started your private practice again at that point?
Well, from there, I actually was like, this feels like an unfair firing. I'll go on other interviews and I'll tell them the whole story and they'll understand. And so I did go on some interviews, but I just wasn't able to tell that story in a way that was palatable. Like, because I was the one that like lost the agency thousands of dollars. I just didn't. I was still like really angry, so I was probably coming across as really angry and spiteful. So I went a handful of interviews. That didn't go well. I ended up applying for unemployment. And the state had to like investigate, was it an unfair firing or was it fair? Whose fault was it? And they found out that like they investigated and they're like, well, this wasn't Jeff's fault. This was the agency's fault. They should have caught this. So I got like decent unemployment benefits, and that gave me enough money to be able to get my own office space and start building up a clientele.
Good. I mean, if that had been fraud, that would have been a really goofy fraud, like where you're
Yeah.
both not benefiting from it and you're actually saying in the notes that the person didn't show up. So,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, it just didn't make sense. And I'll tell you another, this is like a pretty embarrassing part of the private practice or first starting out. Like I told you at the beginning of the story, I first came to Portland and I thought, and I tried to like open up a little private practice and it didn't go well because I was feeling really anxious. And then I stopped, and then yada, yada, yada. All that stuff happened, and I was going to go back in to, start my new private practice. And like I was saying, I was really scared that I would feel anxious again. And the anxiety, the way that it was manifesting was really weird. It wasn't manifesting in ways that I had felt it before. And I would like every now and then struggle with like feelings of anxiety, but it was like, my body would get overheated, or I'd start to like feel a little sweaty, or like I would tremble a little bit, or like my chest was really tight, like the really typical anxiety symptoms. But the anxiety symptoms that I felt at the first time I started my private practice, it felt like I was gonna pee my pants. It felt like I was gonna like lose control of my bladder, and I was just like, I know I'm not going to. I totally have control over it. But every now and then during the session, I was just like, am I doing that right now? Am I peeing my pants?
Oh, God.
And so I'd have to like kind of like look down at my pants and be like, no, nothing's there. And it was just like, this is so bizarre. This is so crazy. I can't deal with this anymore. So going back into private practice, like, God, I'm going to start feeling like I'm going to pee my pants.
Yeah.
I don't know if I should do this again. But luckily, I didn't have that same feeling of anxiety. And I've never had that feeling of anxiety again, thank God. But it was so incredibly distracting.
Like you couldn't do it.
No.
You couldn't do it at that point.
No, I couldn't do it. I couldn't
Yeah.
concentrate on the client.
Yeah.
I couldn't concentrate on what I was thinking or how I was analyzing their case. So, oh God, I'm really happy that was behind me.
Yes.
Yes.
Wow. And then was there a moment as you're going through your second iteration in your private practice, was there a moment when it occurred to you, like, I'm going to add a second business here? It's time to do something more?
Yeah. So the office space that I was renting at, it was a space that had a bunch of part-time therapists in there, and the way that it was run and the way that the office was decorated, it just wasn't really ideal. And it was kind of expensive, and the owner of the building had like a few other spots that they were renting part-time therapist space to. And it was just felt really cold. It felt really unfriendly. It felt like you were like really locked into a long-term contract or a long-term lease and you couldn't get out of it and all this stuff. So I was just like, there's got to be a better way. Like therapists are coming in here and they're feeling stressed out because all the money that they have to put down, you have to sign a 1-year lease. And when you're starting your private practice, you want to believe that that you can easily do a 1-year lease and beyond. But there's this part of you that's just like, what if this doesn't work? What if I feel like I'm going to pee my pants?
Yeah.
I want to know that I can get out of this if I have to. And so that, and then a few other things like around like scheduling, it was really hard to schedule time in the office. I was just like, I'm going to do this the right way. I'm going to optimize how this is done. So while I was built my client load and I saved up enough money to like go get my own space, like my own suite that had 5 offices in it, I did that. And And then I started to advertise in Portland that I have office space that I'm renting for part-time counselors, and these are the changes that I'm making to this already, to this model that's already in Portland that sort of has a monopoly. And it was really attractive to a lot of therapists. So, it's just kind of like month to month lease. You can, if it doesn't work out for you, you can leave anytime. And it's, furnished in a really modern way. You can easily schedule your times. And it was a lot of people just sort of flocked over to me. So that worked really well.
Okay, so I'm seeing like this pattern with that, and then I'm thinking with each of your next businesses that you were experiencing and really closely observing some kind of gap or some kind of problem, and then like figuring out a way to create something to fix it.
Yeah, that was the thing, is that all the little businesses that I've started, they're not super original. They're just sort of like, I'm kind of taking something that's already out there and I'm making it a lot more friendly or user-friendly, or optimizing it in a way that feels a little bit more modern or slightly more hip or something like that. I'm taking these old models that have never been updated and I'm finally updating it. I started that with, the office space, and now I have like 4 different locations where I'm doing that, where I, lease out a space and then rent them part-time. And then I also did that with the local mental health directory. So we all know about Psychology Today, obviously. It's this huge national therapist directory. To me, at least, it doesn't really have much character. It feels very national. It's, you can't call up Psychology Today and say, hey, would you add this? Or this isn't quite working, or the user experience is wacky, over here. So I was like, well, Portland really loves their local stuff, just like most cities like their local stuff. So I'm just going to build a local mental health directory, and I'm going to get all of the Portlanders' input, all the therapists' input, and all of the users that are trying to find a therapist. I want their input as well. So I launched that. It's over 3 years ago now, maybe 4 years ago. And it had all these stages and iterations, and I just kept on optimizing it based on people's feedback. And now it's something that like the city and the therapists have all sort of like created together.
And I'm sure like probably almost everybody listening has a profile on Psychology Today and has that feeling of like being a little bit like you don't have a choice. That's what you have to do. So that's really cool. And you're doing that in San Francisco. We're in the Bay Area now. So that's exciting. And I looked at, it's not launched yet, but I was able to look at just the kind of the introduction to it. And I could see like, oh, this is political. And this is speaking to what at least I know all of my clients are feeling right now. So that's exciting.
Yeah. So if you go to therapyden.com, you can see a little splash page, like a home page, talking about what we're going for and what we're aiming for. So it is political in that one of our mission is therapy, mental health access for everybody, and making a website that has like progressive search filters. So it'll have some similar search filters that PortlandTherapyCenter.com has up here in Portland. But if you're looking for therapy because you're feeling anxious or upset about the political climate, then you can like search for therapists that deal with treating anxiety around the political climate. Or if you're looking for a truly culturally competent therapist, or if you're looking for a therapist because you're dealing with systemic oppression, all of these really issues that we're all dealing with currently are tied into the site. And then I ask therapists and clients, what other search filters are they wanting to be in there? And that's not really something that you can do with Psychology Today because they have to please everybody, or they're just, a big company in New York, so they don't care. I don't know. And so it's really cool to sort of like get in there on the ground floor and ask people what they want to see in these sorts of directories.
Oh, that's very cool. Yeah. I know there's a group that I don't think I've mentioned to you of queer therapists of color in the Bay Area that meet a lot of needs for their clients. Yeah. Yeah. There's just so many possibilities with what you're doing.
Yeah, there really is. Yeah, so it's very exciting.
Yeah. So with all of that, how do you balance your roles with all of these businesses?
Well, I'm I'm not the best at balancing. You know, I'm unbalanced half the time and unbalanced the other half of the time, probably. For the private practice, that was my main thing 10 years ago or so. And I was, working 25 to 30 clients a week. But now that has scaled back to just 2 days a week. So I'm only seeing like 10 to 12 clients each week. And I haven't actually accepted a new client for over a year. And I'm not sure when I'm going to accept new clients again. I have like lots of old clients that are just sort of keep coming in and longer term therapy. So I balance it by trying to shrink the private practice a little bit, but I still always want to have it. And then all the different projects that I'm doing, I try to time them so that they're not all launching at the same time. And I've gotten pretty good at that. But when I do launch a new project, I usually get really excited, slightly obsessed, and I just kind of like go all in. And when that happens, all the other things that I'm doing can sort of like I can lose focus on those things. So I have to be sure to really use my calendar and try to carve out different times throughout the week. These 3 hours are meant for the Practice Academy, and these 3 hours are meant for Porton Therapy Center, and yada, yada, yada. So if I can look at my calendar and really carve out time, then I can stay balanced. But when I start new things, I just sort of like throw the calendar away, eventually get burnt out, and then have to go back to the calendar system.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you just have to keep getting back and giving each business some attention.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. And they're all, even though they're all in the mental health field, they all feel very different to me. They all have like different energy. And if you see a client in private practice and that's going well, then you can feel like you're of value as a therapist. But if you do well creating a successful website, then it's a different type of hit when you get that feeling of value, or when you like mentor a therapist and help them open up a private practice. It's another kind of hit. So I really like to feel all these different feelings of accomplishment. And I think that was one of the things that sort of drove me, because having the private practice feels really great. But then I was like, what else? First of all, there's like kind of a ceiling, like you get this many clients and then you can't take any more. And how do you continue to make extra income after that? But also, how do you diversify so that you can keep yourself really interested in all the different things that you're doing? And so that's what I ended up doing.
I like that, how you're saying, like, how do you not just do the things you want to do, but feel it different ways that you want to feel?
Right.
I'm assuming that you have some other people working with you in some of your businesses.
I do, yeah. First is my wife. She also has her own job where she's a copy editor and a writer. But I create a lot of content in all the things that I do, and she's my editor and business partner and all of these things. And she's very logical and grounded and steady. And so she acts as my rock, and that's been really helpful. Without her, I probably never would have had the confidence or that grounded feeling to kind of launch all these endeavors. And then I also have 2 business partners that are helping me create Therapy Den, that have helped me create all of my other websites in the past as well, but they've just been freelancers. But now we're partnering up for the first time. And one of them is a project manager and user experience expert. So she's really good at creating fantastic user design on websites. And then another guy, he's a programmer, and so he actually develops and writes the code for all the websites.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
And how do you know when it's time to bring on a new team member, or that you need help?
I'm actually somebody who doesn't like bringing on team members. So I have to really, really need to bring on another team member. I like to just sort of dig in and do everything myself and have a lot of control over it. But when there's something that I just can't do, I can't build a website that is this complicated with all these search filters and logins and pages and content and everything. I can't do that myself, and so I need to have somebody that can also do that. So partly when I I bring on a new member just when I just can't physically do the work myself. I can't figure it out. But I'm very picky about who I'm bringing on. And that person, I usually have to know for a while. So we would have had to work together in some sense, or maybe even be friends. And they have to have a good positive attitude and a good sense of humor, but also know when to take things really seriously. And they have to be a really good hard worker. So I don't know if this is like a good quality, but when I do get really obsessed with projects, I just sort of like go all out and I'll work many, many hours a week, 60 or 80 hours a week if I need to. And it's nice to have somebody that could be like that passionate about it. Where they'll want to do that as well. So I tend to kind of like magnetize those people, and those are the people that I take on as partners.
Is there a business book that's influenced you lately?
Well, there was a book. It's a really cheesy book.
Good. I love cheesy business books.
Okay. It's a really cheesy business book, and it's not even it. What I got out of it, I think there's like 30% of the book I thought was really great, and 70% of it was not so great. So I'll give that disclaimer. But it's this book called Launch by Jeff Walker. Have you heard of him?
No.
No? Yeah. And he was all about how to launch an online business. And some of the advice that he gave that really resonated with me was in order to sort of create a good relationship with people, whether it's online or in person, is that you need to give away things for free of value. So the more things that you give away that are free advice, you give away your time, free products, content, whatever it is, if you can give it away for free, then people will start to really see your value and really start to see that you're an authority in the field that you're in. So I really did that with the Practice Academy, where I teach people to, attract more clients online. I was just like, all right, every week I'm going to blog about something about how therapists can move up in search results, and I'm going to give like a free download. And all I'm going to ask for in return is just like, give me your email address, and every week I'll email you with a new download and a new tips and new advice. And so I started to do that, and I started to like really build a pretty big subscriber list for my newsletter. And not only do you sort of build your authority and give more value, but when you're giving away things for free, people start to feel like they really want to give you something back because you're giving away all this like amazing stuff. And I don't know if that's happening consciously or subconsciously, but eventually you're going to like ask something of these people. You might ask them to sign up for something or ask them to download this premium product that costs a few bucks. And right when you do that, then they're just like ready. They feel like so grateful for everything that you've given them, and they'd love to give you some money in exchange because it's sort of like this energetic return. So that's one of the things that I learned from the book Launch. Again, if you read it, it's kind of like it feels really cheesy and really silly, but there's like some really good nuggets in there. And
yeah, and I feel like that's something that like you and I both do for the people that we help is like we read these books that have some cheesy stuff in them and weed through it and pull out the nuggets and share this stuff with therapists. So yeah, I love it. I'm going to read it. I also think having watched you launch your SEO course, I think this other thing that was happening was people were getting so much information from you that they were like, okay, obviously I have all the information I need. If I'm not putting it all into effect yet, I should do this course because I need a little hand holding because clearly information isn't what I'm lacking anymore. So I think it worked that way too.
Yeah, it really did. And I mean, that's the thing with like the SEO stuff, the search engine optimization. Anyone could really go on the internet, whether they read my blog or any other blogs out there, and they could find all this information. But when you put it in this really logical, step-by-step, hand-holding way, it creates a structure. It shows them, just go down this path. You'll get these results at the end of it. It just feels so nice. And especially when like another therapist is teaching a therapist or wellness practitioner how to do these things. It's like, I know your struggle. I know what you're dealing with. I know your clients and your customers. Let's do this together.
Yes.
So yeah, that worked really well.
If just a couple more questions for you. If you were to time travel all the way back to the Jeff that was starting a private practice for the first time, what would you tell him?
Oh man. I would remind him that even though it feels like you're going to pee your pants, you're definitely not going to pee your pants. And that you're, don't try so hard. Don't try so hard and don't feel like everybody is the enemy. Because I had this, like, in my mid-20s, I had this adolescent energy to me, where I felt like everybody who was above me or everybody who was doing better than me, everyone who was my supervisor or manager, they were the enemy. And they were there to, like, hold me down. And so it felt like I was going into these jobs or into whatever I was going into, and I felt like this is going to be a real fight. And I really like rubbed people the wrong way. I made a lot of friends that way, but I also made a lot of enemies that way. And that was a really difficult thing for me to let go of. And eventually, I let go of it because there's this one supervisor at the crisis line that I was working at, and she got her degree at Naropa. Do you know that Naropa
Yeah.
University? Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, where you like, that was like a dream school where I like wish I would have gone, where monks are teaching you and it's all very meditative and beautiful. And you come back and you're like practically enlightened. And so she pulled me aside one day and she was like, Jeff, I think you're great. I think you're really talented. I think you have really good clinical skills, but you're not going to get anywhere if you keep on being a jerk.
Oh.
I was like, oh. She's like, just stop it. And she was like, she was the only person that could like tell me that and that I could really hear that. I wish I would have figured that out a little earlier, but at least I heard it from her and that resonated.
Okay, if we're ever reincarnated, let's go to Naropa and see how
Yes,
how that
please.
all works out. So where can people reach you and throw compliments at you?
Sure. Well, they can find me at my most current project over at therapyden.com. And they can send me an email at hello@therapyden.com. Or they can go to thepracticeacademy.com. That's thepracticeacademy.com, where they can look at all my information on moving up in search rankings and applying SEO to therapist websites. Those are probably the best ways to get a hold of me, but you can also go to my website for my private practice at jeffguenther.com or go to portlandtherapycenter.com to look at my website, local mental health directory for Portland. But again, therapydone.com is probably the best place to find me because that's what I'm focusing on right now.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Jeff. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's time for a question from a listener.
Listener question.
Rachel asks, can you tell us what your top 3 self-care activities are? I'm interested in making balance part of my practice and love getting ideas from other therapists who have incorporated this into their practice. And she says, this week my practices include booking a professional massage, bringing oatmeal for breakfast, and doing plank yoga poses between clients. Okay, so Rachel, for me, doing a plank yoga pose between clients would feel unpleasant. So I'm glad that it's working well for you. I might want to do a stretch. Okay, so my top 3 right now. So I get up an hour early. I have 2 kids, so I get up an hour earlier than either of them so that I can have time to myself, and I read a novel in that time and have a cup of tea and have my breakfast. That means I get up at 5:40, and I never would have thought that that would be pleasant. But in my current life, it works really well. I also have scheduled conversations with my friends and with my sister. So I've got 3 to 4 different scheduled conversations every week. And I do this because a lot of times I don't have time in the evening to catch up with people, to chat. And sometimes I don't even have time on the weekends because I am, doing stuff with my kids. So I find that it's really helpful to have these things scheduled in so that I have those friendships and I get to have those conversations that I experience as self-care. My third strategy is picking a schedule and sticking to it. So I've already decided when I'm available to see clients, and I stick with that. So I don't twist myself into a pretzel to try to make my schedule work for someone else. I used to sometimes fall into doing that, and it often made me feel really frazzled and even resentful. So I'm really glad that I don't do that anymore. Today's snark moment is about the way that some therapists handle consultation calls. So when someone calls you for a consultation, it's so important to help that person feel comfortable. I've talked to people who have been on the receiving end of those consultation calls as the potential client who have felt like the therapist was really unwilling to chat with them for a few minutes and help them get a sense of what it might be like to work with them. The purpose of that consultation call is really to help the person feel comfortable so that they can get a sense of whether they'd like to come in and go a little bit further. It's not just to talk about fees, and it's really alienating when on a consultation call you tell the person that you're really not going to get into their issues until you meet. It's okay not to dive into their issues, but you got to show that this is something that you care about and that you're going to be a caring individual once they get into the therapy room with you. So don't be cold. Don't try to be a blank screen. That's not how you are in your therapy session. So that's really not how you should be in your consultation calls either. Be warm, be you, help the person feel comfortable. It's really okay to have a conversation. Thanks for listening to Therapist Clubhouse. Find articles, show notes, links for everything we talked about, and free training at coachingwithannie.com.